Welcome to the No Streetlights podcast. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Tim. We'll be engaging in vulnerable conversations every Friday to shine a light on what we've been through,
how it changed us, and what we learned. We want to encourage societal growth towards kindness through understanding.
These conversations and the associated language can be triggering.
Listen at your own discretion.
But please reach out if we need to be doing something better.
So, let's take a breath, relax, and be welcome.
You know, Aaron, we talked about it a lot, but man, this has been a really busy year for us.
This year has been insane and will continue to be insane.
Yeah, and I think it's whenever we're at our busiest that it reminds me that I need to be able to take some time and do the things I enjoy. Like, I don't know, maybe play a tabletop RPG or something.
That's funny. I've got a friend who's designed a few of those.
Nuh-uh.
Yeah, his name is James Embry, and he's right here with his luscious locks. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So I know James from Japan, and Tim, it sounds like you have a question.
I definitely have a question, especially when it comes to tabletop RPGs. What is this whole designing a tabletop RPG thing about?
So I designed and wrote the tabletop role-playing game, Raven of the Scythe. It's fantasy, swords and dragons and magic and stuff like that. This is the second game that I've ever designed. The first one was a Wild West Cowboys kind of game called Devil's Crossroad that came out a long time ago. And I wanted to take that experience and kind of up the ante a bit. So I was like, you know what? I love fantasy. I think a lot of people love fantasy. I would like to make a fantasy RPG. And I think 2 or 3 years later, the first version of Raven of the Scythe came out.
Were you working on this whenever you were getting to know Aaron during your guys' time in Japan?
Okay, so I was working on a game when I was in Japan. Through the making process, all I knew was I wanted a fantasy game. Now, the game that I eventually came out with looked nothing like the game I started on in Japan, but depending on how you look at it, yes, I did start the work in Japan. It just morphed a lot between, I think I want to make a game like this and the game that I actually put out. Kind of like the ship metaphor, if you replace one part, until you've built a whole new ship, is it still the same ship? I don't know.
Yeah.
Theseus' ship?
Yeah, I think so.
I like to refer to it as the John dies at the end dilemma. Have you ever read that book or watched that movie?
No.
Oh man, highly recommend it.
The one by Jason Wong, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
But he poses the same dilemma, but instead of talking about a ship, he talks about an axe, and it's a very funny way to look at it. But
okay,
I know I kind of jumped ahead here a bit, Aaron.
Mm-hmm.
Your guys' background, how you guys know each other, and James, just who are you? You know, you're definitely more than just Raven of the Scythe. I want to hear as much as you're willing to put out to me today.
I mean, I was born and raised in Kentucky. I think that had a huge influence on me. I grew up in the 80s and stuff like that in kind of a rural area. So it's it was the 80s, but it wasn't the cool version of the 80s that you see on TV and stuff like that.
So it's not Stranger Things?
Well, I mean, there's parts of Stranger Things that come close because if you get far enough outside city limits, the 80s just becomes the 70s part 2.
Oh.
So I grew up in that time period. I guess my genesis as my involvement with tabletop role-playing games, when I was in 7th grade, and I remember this as it was such a weird specific chain of events. When I was in 7th grade, I was taking a history class, and the teacher, who I've actually tried to track down, but I haven't been able to find her. I really liked this teacher. She was super influential. we were getting into the chapter on medieval history and the Dark Ages and stuff. And she was like, okay, this is a really, really hard chapter. And as a reward, anyone who makes an A on the test for it is going to, instead of going to a normal lunch, we're going to go on a little field trip. We're going to walk down to a pizza place, like a couple of blocks down from the school, and I'll take you guys all out for like a pizza dinner. And
That's awesome.
okay, so I made an A on my medieval history class test in 7th grade, which let me walk down the street toward the pizza parlor for my pizza party day. But on the way there, I passed a yard sale. So I like broke off from the rest of the class and like ran up to this yard sale. And there I found a box set of one of the old starter sets for Dungeons and Dragons. And they wanted $5 for it. So I bought it with my pizza money. And that was how I got into pen and paper role playing games.
Which edition was this?
So I don't think it fits in any of the. I still have the rule book that came out of that particular box set. It's called the Classic Dungeons and Dragons.
I'm gonna have to Google classic Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, I don't think.
Yeah, this is back like, okay, there were no races or anything like that. If you want to be a dwarf, that is your class. It wasn't until later on that like you could be like a dwarven cleric or anything like that. Like this is very, very bare bones, even by old school D&D standards. But man, like the world that opened up for me was just phenomenal.
Wow.
I found the classic Dungeons and Dragons game set book on Amazon,
Yeah.
and they want £135 for it.
Worth every penny.
Yeah.
I know whenever I met you, you identified a bit as an outsider. You know, you felt like
Yeah.
you didn't quite fit in with where you came from and so on. So tell me about your groups and your characters at this early point.
Okay, so our early game groups or whatever consisted largely of me and like my small handful of like weird friends out in single wide trailers in the woods somewhere with Coleman lanterns and stuff like set up. But like back then it was so cool because like, you know, this is around like middle school time. So like you go over to your friend's house, like, well, no, you would ride the bus home to go home with them on Friday. And then you ride the bus back to school with them on Monday morning. So you get the whole weekend there, right? We would put blankets and stuff over the windows to like keep the sunlight and stuff out. And like we would just sit there and play literally the entire weekend. Like sometimes we would take breaks for like naps and food and stuff like that. And there was no internet or anything back then. I can't stress that enough. Since there wasn't any internet, there was no community outside of the people you knew. And so you had no idea how things were like supposed to be played, how this game was supposed to look. If you had a like misunderstanding about the rules or something like that, you figured it out because it's not like you could go online and like ask somebody or anything like that.
Yeah, there's no ask the judge.
Lots and lots of house rules. So like we just rolled with it like that. And then from this jumping off point, for Christmas, I was given a box set of like the starter set for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and that was my intro to like technically second edition. And we thought that was so cool because now you could be like an elven wizard or like a dwarven thief and stuff like that. And like there were more spells and more like this game only goes up to level 5. The classic box set does.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so like we didn't even know that spells like wish and stuff like that existed.
And at every point, being only level 5, you could very sincerely die to a trap.
Exactly. So yeah, like I remember there was one fighter because this was back whenever, you know, you rolled for hit points like every level or whatever. Like there was a fighter when he rolled for his hit points at first level, 1d10, he got a 2.
Ooh.
So the fighter's running around with 2 hit points, and like somehow this dude made it to level 2 and rolled for his hit points again, and this time he got a 1. So at level 2, he's got 3 hit
Oh, that's
points.
so bad. Ah.
Yeah. Like, and like, it didn't go any further than that. You know, this was a different environment than what role playing is now.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I was introduced into Dungeons and Dragons during 3.5. Well, I started playing before 4th edition came out. So 3.5 was like really the only modern quote unquote way to play the game, which that's still my preferred version to play, but I'll play 5th edition cuz it's easy and the books
3.5 is your favorite?
3.5, yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, you know, it's so crazy to think about because I definitely couldn't imagine playing Dungeons and Dragons or any tabletop RPG, just to clarify here, without utilizing like some kind of online sources or things of that nature to like help me look up, you know, what rulings are supposed
Our
to be.
first character sheets were written on like notebook paper because you couldn't print those things out.
Yep.
So it gives you a character sheet in the back of the book. This is what it looked like back then.
Yep.
Yeah.
And if we could like get enough of like our lunch money together, whatever, we'd go to the school library and like Xerox copies of that. But yeah, otherwise it's just notebook paper and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you've described this like nostalgic feeling of what you remember tabletop RPGs were whenever
Mhm.
you were younger. Did
Yeah.
this have a massive influence in you wanting to create your own tabletop RPG? Were you trying to grasp that nostalgia?
In Raven of the Scythe, whenever I came up with that,
Mm-hmm.
yes, absolutely.
That makes sense because you were saying in the classic Dungeons and Dragons book, it only went up to level 5. So at most, you have, what is that, 60 hit points if you're rolling d12s?
Yeah. Well, no one had D12 back then because there were no barbarians.
Oh, so yeah, that's
Yeah.
maybe.
Okay, I take back my origin story just a little bit as far as like Raven of the Scythe is technically the 3rd game I have made because when I was 13 years old, I was a big fan of the Highlander show that came on with Adrian Paul, like, and had like the Queen song as the theme and everything.
Right.
And I decided to make a Highlander role-playing game, right? But I'm kind of dumb. So I get this game and I was like, man, this might actually work. Like, I'm excited about this. And I've been working on it for like 3 days. And I feel like I've got a pretty firm grasp of like the rules for my Highlander game at this point. I had a subscription to the Highlander catalog, which was this thing you used to have. It was like a mail order, like you could get Highlander merchandise and stuff, right?
Uh-huh.
Some OG subscription stuff.
Yeah. So I found the corporate number for like Highlander in the back of the book of my magazine. And I called them and was like, hey, I'm making a Highlander role-playing game. Would you guys be down with this? And the poor girl I was talking to on the phone was like, I don't know. I'll take your number down, but like, and I was like, okay, cool. And so, you know, a week or two passed and I don't know. I like really got into magic or something. So like, I'd like stopped doing like, I was, you know, or like Final Fantasy come out or something, you know, like I was, you know, I'm at home by myself one day. Phone rings. I pick it up. It's a guy from Highlander there. And he's like, hey, we heard you were working on a Highlander role-playing game. And I said, yeah, I was, but I kind of got bored with that. So I'm not doing anything with it right now. He was like, oh, okay. I mean, you know, you could flip a coin. There was equal odds I might have been about to get sued, but
Sued or mad supported.
Yeah, like
we
will give you $400,000 to work on this.
Well, back then it would have been like $400.
Whatever.
Yeah,
same
which
thing.
would have been awesome. So anyway, yeah, my role-playing game creation history is Raven of the Scythe, Devil's Crossroad, the short-lived Highlander RPG.
So is it safe to say that you never played the Highlander RPG?
You know what? It never got to beta testing.
Darn. What a shame. You should bring it back.
Yeah.
Look for those old notebook papers and bring it out.
Right.
And then try and call that corporate number and see if anybody will answer still.
Right.
We need to track that guy down.
Yeah, we got to find him. I want to know what he was about to tell you.
Like, I don't know his name, but someone who identified himself as, quote, from Highlander called me on the phone that day in like 1994 or whenever it was.
I got bored. I'm not working on that right now. Oh, okay.
So, as we go through high school, did you go from AD&D into 3rd edition, or was it AD&D all through school?
No, so 3rd edition was huge. Like, that was the first like major like edition war that people came out with. I was subscribed to Dragon magazine at the time, and so we were getting all these like spoilers and previews and stuff like that about what was going to be in 3rd edition. And there was this series of articles, like every month they would come out, like, here's a rule from 3rd edition that you can start introducing into your games right now. And
the OG D&D 1, is it what they're calling it?
Yeah. And at that point, I had a new friend group that I was about to introduce to Dungeons and Dragons. We all like pre-ordered our players' handbooks, so we had those like the day they came out, and we immediately jumped straight into 3.0.
That must have been a heck of a jump.
Well, see, they'd never played 2nd edition. They'd never played any Dungeons and Dragons before that point, so that was their jumping on point. And for me, this is where I started hitting like the first kind of like hurdles, I guess, or whatever, because like I was used to the way things worked in 2nd edition.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of expected most of those things to still work in 3rd edition. It wasn't until a few months in that I was like, wow, this is really, really different. But not in the ways that like you would think. Like the stuff they were advertising was totally cool. Like there was stuff like, the way multi-classing in 3rd edition worked and stuff like that. That was revolutionary compared to what 2nd edition was doing. Other role-playing games might have been doing something similar at the time. I really wasn't too abreast of what was going on outside of Dungeons and Dragons at the time, so I can't speak to that. But the idea that you could just switch back and forth between classes, that was great. And the way your abilities, so like in 2nd edition, if you wanted to raise one of your ability scores, it took like a wish spell. And in 3rd edition, they just let you do that every 4 levels.
Yeah.
It was really, really cool. Like some of the stuff they were giving us, like, so, and like, again, and this was the early internet. And so like at that point, there was one computer in our school library that had internet access that you could sign up for 10 minutes. That was your only access to what was online. So outside of my local group and what I was reading in Dragon magazine, that was really the only thing that I had that was my only insight to the larger community. Because once again, I lived in a rural area. There weren't any like game shops or conventions or anything like that. There was like the weird guy who worked at the pizza shop who like had a bunch of magic cards and knives that you could like ask questions sometimes. Like
go in and order the Bob Marley special. He'll meet you out back for 20 bucks.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Like I'm pretty sure he lived in that van. Like, yeah. I don't know.
Hopefully he didn't invite people to his van.
What's next? You went to university, right?
Yes, Eastern Kentucky University. Continued playing there. All in all, that was a really good time during, that's whenever 3.0 switched to 3.5. And like, I never really made the jump to 3.5 entirely. Like, I really liked the feats that were in the player's handbook from 3.5. And I think that was about all I took. I had no interest in rebuying all of my rule books and stuff like that. And like, for the most part, it was like compatible enough to like kind of fake your way through it and stuff. As my college stuff like kind of started winding down, I think I was a little bit burned out with Dungeons and Dragons at that point. And at this point, I switched over to White Wolf's World of Darkness system pretty extensively. And I played that almost exclusively for the next few years, was really into New World of Darkness. And then I guess maybe one of my first attempts at actually making a game. This is the Highlander days are like a distant memory at this point. But what I did was in second edition, there was a system called proficiency or non-weapon proficiencies. And so the way those worked would be like my character has proficiency in cooking because they were all pretty useless. It was just for role playing, like fluff kind of stuff. And the way your cooking worked is like your cooking skill would be like, and I'm just making these numbers up. Like, I hope no one comments like, well, actually, the cooking skill was.
Well, actually.
Your cooking skill, your cooking score is going to be like intelligence +2. So you look at your intelligence score and it's like, oh, well, I've got an intelligence of 15, +2 is 17. So I have to roll a d20 and roll a 17 or under to successfully cook something. And that's as simple as it was. And I was like, that's a pretty neat system, actually. I really like that. I think there's something I could do with this. And I started tinkering around with it. And like I tried to make kind of a core mechanic based on that. Very similar to GURPS, I guess. Anyway, the idea of like rolling under your stat plus a modifier. And then I was like, wait a second, haven't they already done this? And there's an old game made by TSR. It's been out of print since like 1999 or something. It's called Alternity. And it's a science fiction role-playing game. They basically use that exact system that I was thinking of. Like you could clearly tell how the designers were taking the non-weapon proficiency rules and like stretching it to its logical conclusion. So I was like, man, maybe I just want to play Alternity because this looks pretty sick. So I got to playing Alternity, and for years, I would swear to anyone that Alternity was my favorite role-playing game. Like, there's so much cool stuff in there. So at this point, I'm playing New World of Darkness and Alternity and kind of keeping abreast of what's going on in the Dungeons and Dragons world. It's after this period where I've pretty much, I think I graduated, or it was like the year after I graduated, or like the year before I graduated or something. I don't know. It's like right around that time that I was also playing Call of Cthulhu at this point, that I was like, I think I want to make a role-playing game all of my own, because this idea didn't seem as hard anymore. Because like before, you know, you want to make a game, that's cool, but what can you do with it? But now, thanks to the internet and like how prominent it is, you know, people are sharing PDFs and files, and like it didn't seem impossible to make a game. Mm-hmm. So I set out to make a game, and that's how I made Devil's Crossroad. And like I'm very proud of Devil's Crossroad. I learned a lot from making it as like my first attempt. It's not the best game in the world. I think that I had some remarkably good ideas scattered through it here and there. What I've been told people who've asked me about it recently is I'm like, look, the newest edition of Call of Cthulhu does everything that that Devil's Crossroad could do, except does it better. So if you want to play Devil's Crossroad, just play the new Call of Cthulhu, but use cowboys instead of cultists.
I definitely remember you having a long jacket and smoking a cigarette at this point.
yeah. Like, so then I started playing in Japan, and I really didn't want to get into Dungeons and Dragons, because Dungeons and Dragons is like, that is a huge investment of time and effort. Just starting out, you're looking at 3 books, the Player's Handbook, the DMG, and the Monsters Manual or whatever, just to get a good feel of the game. That's a lot. And given, you know, what our work schedules were, like that's I felt like it was a lot to ask of potential players.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So instead I started playing Green Ronin, I think is the one who made it, the Dragon Age RPG. We started playing that as our fantasy RPG, and that really kind of got me back for the first time since Dungeons and Dragons in college. I was like, man, I remember why I liked fantasy now. There's so much cool stuff you can do here. And it was from that game that I was like, okay, I know more now. I think I want to try this again. And that's how Raven of the Scythe eventually came out, was from my little gripes here and there with the Dragon Age game.
That's pretty incredible. Like you, you play the Dragon Age game and you sit here, and now here we are talking about Raven of the Scythe, 346 pages. And what I love, and I know we talked about this during our brainstorm, what I love about it is I feel like what you were talking about with the Dungeon Master's Guide, Player's Handbook, and Bestiary,
Mhm.
you've combined all three of those things into your one book. I guess you could call it almost a one-stop shop for any of the players.
That was the goal. Like, if you want to play Raven of the Scythe, you buy this book, and this is all you need.
Oh man, is that's the hardcover book?
Oh yeah, yeah. You not got yours yet?
No, I'm all the
Yep.
way in Italy, man. So it's gonna be a little bit before
Yeah,
I
this
get
is what
it.
it looks like.
Oh, that looks so good. I cannot wait to get mine in.
Uh-huh.
Oh heck yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to order one now. Seeing it, oh my
Dude,
god!
it's so cool looking. Jeez.
I got the PDF for like quick reference.
Mm-hmm,
But-
mm-hmm.
Man, I think we're gonna have to have one of those on the shelf for sure, James.
Yeah.
Cool.
Now, what I love is in the beginning of Raven of Scythe, as soon as you open it up and you know you get through your typical table of contents. I don't know why I was blanking so much on what that's called. You get to the area where you're talking about your inspirations, and every single thing that you've mentioned so far is in your inspirations listed in your book. You have Dungeons and Dragons, Dragon Age by Green Ronin, Call of Cthulhu, Dark Ages, and Alternity.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
I love that you gave a huge shout out to those games, especially Alternity, right? Which is, you said it's been out of print since like 1999.
Yeah.
People are gonna read that and be like, "What the hell is Alternity?"
I hope so. Like, I want them to check it out. Like,
Did TSR make Dungeon Crawl Classic?
I don't think so. No, because TSR went out of. They got bought out by Wizards of the Coast in '99, I think.
I don't know who made Dungeon Crawl Classic, Aaron, but I love that book.
So James, tell me, what were your main things that you wanted to address whenever you made Raven of the Scythe? What were the innovative things that you were like, this is how I'm going to do it?
Okay, so there were a couple of things. One of them was tone. Like, at some point, Dungeons and Dragons morphed from a fantasy role-playing game, like a la things like, Conan or Lord of the Rings, into a more high-powered, high magic. Gone are the days of, like, culty snake people like under the mountain and stuff like that. Now we've got like flying castles and eldritch
Tarrasque,
knights and stuff like that. Yeah.
The Elder Gods.
Just the overall, the expected power level is on a completely different scale than what it was back in the day. And there's a couple of reasons for that. So remember how I told you it was cool back how when they switched from second edition to third edition, that like they opened a lot of stuff up.
Mm-hmm.
So in second edition, you had, and I'm going to get some of this stuff wrong, like your comments are going to hate it, but okay, there were 4 main classes. They were like fighters, thieves, is what they were called back then, magic users, and clerics. And those were the 4 main ones.
Yeah.
And then you had things like bards and rangers and paladins and druids and stuff like that. But if you wanted to play one of those, you had to meet certain ability score requirements at character creation. So in order, like, rangers were cool because they were like fighters, but they had some thievy skills and they could also cast spells. Paladins were like fighters, but they also had cleric magic, stuff like that. And that was really cool. Like, you wanted to play these, but if you used the attribute generation method they gave you in the book, very few people are going to meet those requirements. So if you've got a paladin in your party, you're already golden. Like, that's somebody played a mythic rare right there. And of course, you could fudge the numbers or ignore it or whatever, but as per the rules written, that was the expectation. Well, in third edition, they got rid of the requirements. So now, if you want to play a paladin, just play a paladin. You can play the paladin. It's fine. You can play a ranger. Great. You can play a paladin who multi-classes into druid, I guess, if you did it right. There were some alignment restrictions, but for the most part, it's wide open now. But what that did was, out of the 11 classes that were in 3.0, 6 of them are now magic users. So your party composition went from like maybe you have one magic user to now you've got 2 or 3.
Everyone has dark vision in 5e problem.
Yeah, yeah. And now they're not squishy little 4-hit dice dudes with like one spell and a robe. Now they've got feats and meta magics and mage armors and things like that. Like the survivability is a lot higher. So now everyone has access to magic, whereas before very few people did. Like if you were a fighter in second edition and you wanted to have magic, you either needed to find an item that lets you somehow duplicate that ability, or you needed to really, really sweet talk your GM to make some kind of house rule for you, because otherwise it's not happening, rules as written. And after 20 plus years of that, now you can be a fighter who by default takes a subclass like Eldritch Knight or something and gets magic. Or you can be a rogue who does like Arcane Trickster or something. You don't even have to multi-class anymore. You can just be a fighter who uses magic. And what that does to the assumptions of the gameplay, of like the world building and stuff like that, like it's very hard to make a low magic or low fantasy Dungeons and Dragons world.
Yeah.
Another thing that I wanted to address with Raven of the Scythe was, okay, so Raven of the Scythe, there are no classes and there are no levels. It's all, you get experience points for, going on your quests, and then you spend those experience points to get things. You can either invest in raising your stats, you can increase your skills, or you can take favors, which are, I guess equivalent to feats or something like that. Like, you can use them to learn more magic. You can you do like a new cool sword trick or something like that. It's really open-ended to what you want to do with your XP. And the reason I went that route was because, and I'm not trying to throw Dragon Age under the bus here, because like this is very common in role-playing games. But when I was playing Dragon Age, I noticed that like some people were really invested in the game. They were invested in their characters as people, and they really liked the role playing with them, but they weren't too into the fidgety like abilities and stuff like that. Like you made it to level 4, so now you get this new thing or whatever, and they're like, well, I've never used that thing before because I've never had it, and it's not part of how I play my characters. So a lot of their abilities got underutilized. Whereas, some other people in the game, like, they love that stuff. Every time they leveled up, they'd get a new ability. They're like pouring through it, being like, ooh, can I use this to combo off of that? Like, and it's just different versions of how they're playing their characters. So I designed Raven of the Scythe in such a way that if you're the type of person who likes to get into fidgety new abilities and stuff like that, you can do that. You can spend all of your XP just buying new favors and get all the cool little like, well, I'm going to use an extended action to use Precise Strike to get +2 with my longsword. And then I've got this other ability that's going to let me, or you can be like, well, I'm going to use my XP to increase my willpower so that way I've got more determination to spend. Like, and both of them are completely valid ways of playing. And I wanted to give a way that those two players could exist at the same table without either of them feeling underutilized.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
I've got a couple questions.
Sure.
Were you playing mostly modules and homebrew? Or sorry, modules or homebrew?
I've never played a published adventure module in my life.
Okay.
I've bought several of them. I have read through them. I have ripped off Tomb of Horrors more times than I can count, but I've never actually sat down and ran it. I have made my own version of Curse of Strahd or Ravenloft and stuff like that. And I've pulled things from adventure modules for my own games, but I've never sat down and run them like, okay, guys, today we're doing Storm King's Thunder. Like, get ready.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Uh-huh.
I think one thing that strikes me so fascinating about Raven of the Scythe is, okay, so 3.5 being my preferred version of D&D, I find myself with a plethora of options, such as,
yes,
you can play a Goliath druid, or literally insert anything, any kind of race to any kind of class, you can play it, right?
Put two nouns together and there's probably something in Dungeons & Dragons for you.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah.
But what's awesome about Raven of the Scythe is, and I brought this up, was whenever you go to the character creation, you don't look at races.
Yeah, everyone's human here.
Everybody's human. And that's so cool to me because
Mhm.
okay, I know a lot of people are like, but more options makes everything better. But it's like sometimes you can just be overwhelmed with how many options you have.
Right,
And
right.
like I'm just sitting here anytime somebody's ever been like, "Hey, do you want to play a game of Dungeons and Dragons?" I'm like, "Ah, man, what the fuck do I want to play?" But if somebody was like, "Hey, do
Yeah,
you want
yeah,
to play
yeah.
a game of Raven of the Scythe?" I'd be like, "Oh, I'm gonna be a human. But what kind of human am I gonna be?"
Yeah, yeah. So I'm very proud of the character creation rules in Raven of the Scythe because like I wanted it to be quick. Then the way I set it up was like it's modular. Anyway, there's every page is a different step of character creation. Like this is how you assign your attributes. Turn the page. This is how you pick your skills. Like turn the page. This is so that way a new player doesn't just get hit with like a barrage of options.
Oh yeah, and like just to say it, like that is what I love about your game, the simplification. Like one of the big things that you were telling me is that you want most of the math to happen at the game table, not at character creation.
Yeah.
And I feel like all of these other modern day tabletops are keeping most of the math at character creation, which it can take you a day or two. There's always this famous like session 0 where you sit there and you're basically building your character the entire
Mhm.
time. And it's like, well, I don't want to spend my 4 hour or 2 hour, whatever allotted amount of time that I'm supposed to be playing a tabletop RPG building a character and watching three other people build a character too.
Right. So I don't know if you're aware of it or not, but okay, there's a series of video games called Soul Calibur.
Yeah. I think I played them a couple times way back in the day. Yeah.
Okay, the only one I ever played was Soul Blade. I had it for the PS1 back in the day, and like I still regularly watch the intro video because I don't know, it's just really cool. They had this little song going, and like they show like a PS1 cinematic intro of like all the characters doing their cool stuff.
Yeah.
And like it's a weapons based fighting game, like Mortal Kombat or whatever. Except you've got one dude, he's a knight, and you've got another dude, he uses nunchucks, and then there's a pirate. But when you get right down to it, they're all fighters. Like every single one of them is a fighter type character. And one day, just on a lark, I went through the Raven of the Scythe rules and I made each of those characters using the Raven of the Scythe rules. And like they're all fighters. Every single one of them, would fall in the fighter archetype or whatever. But according to the rules, they all play different.
Yeah.
Like the guy with the broadsword feels different than the guy with the nunchucks, and like the pirate plays different than the dude with the big hammer. Like
If you haven't published that, dude.
because like I wanted your characters. I wanted it to be as simple as possible, but at the same time, I wanted your characters to feel as unique as possible. And since I can't fall back on like well, I'm an axe using dwarf. I had to do something different. So like the weapon styles in the game are kind of how your non-magic users get defined. Like it's very easy to establish like, oh, I'm a fighter versus I'm a wizard. But then between the fighters, it's like, okay, well, what makes this fighter different from this fighter? And the way D&D handles that is typically with, well, this one uses magic or this one uses a different type of magic or
A
this
different type
one
of
has
magic.
yeah. So what I did was like I leaned into like the weapon styles. Like there's basically a favor tree for each of the weapon styles so that the axe user has different options than the sword user versus the rapier user. Every single one of those fighters plays differently. Or you could go the jack of all trades route and take like the first level like introduction ability for every weapon type. And I'm not saying it's the best, but I'm saying that's certainly a valid option. And like I've seen people who've like, split between two different styles that they want to use based on the situation. So
Yeah, they sound like a character from The Last of Us carrying around. They got multiple different kinds of weapons on them: a bow and arrow, a gun, a shotgun, a rifle.
right. Yeah, why not?
I'm counting 10 pages of different weapon styles
Mm-hmm.
here in Raven of the Scythe.
Yeah.
So there is a huge level of customization here where you can have a gaff hook or a scythe, or you can have a rope dart there's infinitely many a whip sword, infinitely many options.
I see you're on the unusual weapons page.
Yeah, I'm scrolling back and forth like a madman because it's captivating that, you can just have a farmer who gets fed up and walks out of his field with his
He's got his scythe and like he's ready to go. Like he's tired of these goblins getting in his field. Like
damn goblins.
Get off my lawn!
oh no! Speaking of goblins, one of the things I learned from this game is like because when I originally started it, I wanted it to be setting agnostic, right?
Yeah.
And what I learned really quick in the game creation process is it is impossible to make a setting agnostic set of fantasy rules. Because something as simple as what weapons I included, that tells you a little bit about the setting.
Yeah, I would argue a lot.
Yeah. Like one of my regrets with this one, and like it came down to a page count issue, was like that I didn't include guns. And like I have been kicking myself for that ever since, but the fact that there are no guns in the rules tells you something about the assumptions of the setting. And this gets even bigger when you start trying to design a magic system, because the way magic works tells you about the metaphysics of the world.
Yeah.
And so I brought up goblins. I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but in the beastie area, there really aren't any like intelligent other species, like monstrous races. Like there aren't goblins and orcs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And part of the reason was I wanted, for lack of a better term or whatever, I wanted all the bad guys in this game to also be human. Like, yeah, there's dragons and demons and stuff like that, but like for the vast majority of the like antagonists you're going to be facing, you're dealing with other people, because like people can be just as bad as like any goblin or orc or gnoll or troll or anything like that. And by having all the heroes being humans and all the bad guys being humans, I don't know, maybe it's a statement about the duality of man, or like I don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely there's man versus environment, man versus self, man versus man, man, whatever the last one is.
Yeah.
I do find that captivating, that it is people fighting one another, because that's the reality we live in.
Yeah, because like I think whenever you make a world, and I'm not, this is just me talking, okay? Like I'm not saying anybody's wrong or whatever, but when you're like, oh yeah, like then the dark elves came and like, burned the temple and they made it their lair for their like evil elf god or something.
The Fire Nation attack.
Like there's a level. Yeah. That creates a level of separation between, it's like, oh, well, yeah, of course they did that because they're bad. Whereas if you have like an enemy nation or something do that, it's like, well, why would they do that? That seems like such a mean thing to do. Like,
yeah.
It forces you to confront some uncomfortable realities or whatever about how people treat each other. And without going into any like, real world politics or histories or anything like that, I guess that was my attempt to like make the game at least a little bit socially conscious.
Yeah. I mean, I always find it more captivating. I'm a player, and well, I think it's been a while since I've played. I've more GM'd since I've started the past like 10 years. But I've always found it more captivating to have like a villain that was intelligent. And typically a lot of my villains were actually humans. I kind of wonder what that says about how I view things.
For me, it's always devils and demons at war.
Always the devils and the damn demons.
Whatever that says.
Yeah, like blood for the blood god.
But
corn,
James, I do want to go ahead and point it out, because you brought us back to the bestiary now, right? You have about 75 pages of creatures in your book. Skeletons. Yes. You have haunted armor, which is awesome. I love the artwork, by the way. So huge shout out to the artist that did the artwork, because it is absolutely incredible.
He was great. There's also a companion bestiary that you can get that is just the animals, like wolves and tigers and like stuff like that. Yeah. Like it's just available in PDF, but it's out there.
I'm gonna have to look for that. Last time we talked, I told you that my favorite artwork was your Fiend, the spawn of Belania. Am I saying that right, or am I saying that wrong?
Yeah, sure.
However you say it at your
like
table,
a true
Tim.
tabletop RPG player. It's whatever you want to call it.
Uh-huh.
And I also want to point out the artwork of the Hydra, which,
Mm-hmm.
holy crap, that thing looks menacing.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, for me, it's definitely the Earthadren, the demon that's got like an elephant head.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Dude. And as I've gone through these different monsters in this bestiary, it's blowing me away how different each one feels. Like the abilities that they have,
Mm-hmm.
the skills they have, even like their guard versus their determination. It puts you in a totally different feel as both the GM and the player.
Yeah.
It's, oh shit, I'm engaged with this very real thing that is gonna fuck me up, honestly.
Yeah, like I wanted all the monsters to feel as different as possible, and like because sometimes you need different things for different adventures. And like as someone who's DM'd almost my entire adult life, or before even, like I don't think you can ever have enough creatures. Because like sometimes you need something like creepy and like kind of like aesthetic, and like sometimes you need a big bag of hit points that's going to come at you hard, because these things challenge the players in different ways. By having a variety of creature types, it kind of organically, everyone talks about like spotlight moments and stuff like that. And so like they're like, oh, well, I have a cleric in the party, so I'm going to have them be attacked by a horde of skeletons. So the cleric gets to use, their turn and dead abilities and stuff. But if all your monsters are just kind of inherently different, it kind of creates those organic spotlight moments just by virtue of like some characters are better suited for certain things than others are.
Yeah, definitely. I was always really big into whenever I would create like main storyline encounters, I would always do something like just random encounter, roll it up beforehand, have it pre-set up so I already know what the encounter is going to be.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of random encounters. Because like I want my worlds to feel real. I want the things that the characters or the players do to feel like they have consequences. And part of that means you're living in a world that's going to respond to you. But also sometimes it's just going to throw stuff at you that like no one was expecting.
You're walking through a forest and the next thing you know, you accidentally brush up against the wrong tree that has like a nymph living in it or something. And well, you just pissed off that nymph.
Yeah.
So good luck.
Uh-huh.
Speaking of gigantic creatures with squishy hit points, your game is no stranger to the concept of introducing dragons. And, I think some people would say that dragons make a true tabletop RPG. So is that kind of where your idea was whenever you said dragons need to be in this world?
Yeah, for sure. Because like if you're going to run a fantasy RPG or whatever, at some point someone's going to want to fight a dragon. And I wanted to make the coolest dragons that I possibly could using this system. And that's where I came up with the idea of dragons getting different powers as they get older. But like there's a list of dragon powers that the DM assigns to the dragon or whatever, so that like they all should feel different. If you go back even to old medieval stories about dragons and stuff like that, like, there was no like codified, like,
these are the 5 things
yeah,
that dragons
it's like, as
do.
we all know, dragons like breathe fire, like, but not on Sunday because like they respect the Sabbath.
Of course.
But and it's like a 20-foot cone, and they can't pick up iron, but their skin is like this hard or whatever. Like there was none of that. It was like just different dudes telling different stories, and it's like this dragon breathes fire, and like this dragon has wings, and this dragon has a venomous bite. And
Yep.
I wanted to bring that so that whenever people started hearing rumors about dragons, that it would be like, oh shoot, this sounds really scary and also different from the last dragon we heard about. So you could populate your world with these like different unique dragons without being like, oh, it's a blue dragon, so it's going to have lightning.
Yeah. First of all, I think it's really important because it helps keep your players on their toes. Like there's always this
Mhm.
concept in tabletop RPGs where meta gaming kind of gets in the way a little bit. Once I don't know, every single group has always had that player or two or three, or maybe the whole party that likes to just sit there and go through the monster manual and they're like, "Whoa, man, this thing is so cool. What does it do?" And then as the GM, like
Mhm.
couple sessions down the road, you go and introduce whatever creature it was, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I know
Yeah.
everything about these things, man. Yeah, they don't get hit by its claws. Its claws have poison or something." And
Right,
I
right.
like the idea that your dragons are customizable to avoid that.
The last game that I played in, I was playing in a 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons game, and I had a great time with it. I was having a lot of fun. I played a monk because I based my character entirely off Vegeta from Dragon Ball Z Abridged.
Hell
And so
yes.
at one point we came back to our house and like our house had been vandalized or something. Like somebody clearly ransacked it or whatever. And I was like, okay, do I see anything? And the dude's like, nah, man, there's just some rats there, like eating on the food that's been spilled out or whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, grab a rat. Like, everybody, grab a rat. And they're like, why? And I'm like, no time to explain. Just grab the rats. Don't kill them. So, finally, we grab like a couple of rats and they're like, okay, why do you want these rats? I take them over to our druid player and I'm like, here you go. Now
Speak
cast
with
speak with
animals.
animals and ask these rats what they saw. And she's like, I have that spell. And I'm like, you're a druid. You can cast speak with animals.
How do you not know these things? Come on, know your character.
And then later on, we're trying to figure out more information. We're just floating ideas of what we could do. And I was like, I don't know, maybe we go down in the sewers and try to ask the were rats if they saw anything. And they're like, do you think there's were rats down there? And I'm like, we are in a city with a population larger than 10. There's going to be were rats in the sewer.
The door's a mimic.
On the one hand, because if you live in these worlds, you would expect people to know these things. But at the same time, if you're fighting the legendary who's a McCall of Watch It Wear Hollow, maybe you don't know that the thing has a 20-foot fear aura going into the fight. So you really want to balance that.
Yeah.
Which and this is just me, other people might disagree with me or whatever, but at the table when you're playing or whatever, I have very little problem telling my players stuff they're like, oh, how bad is he look? And I was like, oh yeah, he's at less than half, as far as hit points go. And you know what? One more solid hit will probably take him down. And
Yep.
because if this was a real fight, if you were really watching this happen or whatever, you were really engaged in this, there would be so many visual and audio and just tactile clues that you could pull from.
Yep.
That would give you information about what's happening. So I don't think it benefits anybody to hide information like that from my players. There's this joke whenever someone's like, how many hit points do you have left? And DM's like, no, you can't tell him that. That's metagaming. And he's like, let's say on a scale of 1 to 38, I'm at about a 17.
Yeah. Yep. As the resident cleric.
Yeah. It's this is information you need to know, and it's information that you would have if you look over at your buddy and his face is bleeding.
Yeah, his eyeball's hanging out of its freaking orbital socket.
Right. So
How much fear? Is it normal fear or shitting your pants?
Right.
On a scale of 1 to 38. That's awesome.
I want to shift gears just a tiny little bit. I love how tangible your magic system feels.
Okay.
A lot of these feel like things that are going to take time and they're intricate. Even the name, Invoke Death versus Claws of Darkness and Mask of Fear, these feel like big complex things that you have to know exactly what you're doing. And I sincerely appreciate that, how it's not just throwaway. I'm just pew, 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 pew.
So when it came to designing magic, that was really the final nail in the coffin. I'm like, shoot, this cannot be setting agnostic. So originally in first edition, there were only 6 schools of magic, and demonology came later. At the table, in my experience, the magic users in this game play a bit more like Magic the Gathering than they do Dungeons and Dragons. Because if you're playing an evoker versus an illusionist, Like those are the spells you have access to. And so you're going to build your character and make your choices around those spells. I had one character that played in a game for a very long time, and she was an illusionist, and she had an animal companion. So it was a badger.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this spell in the illusion school. It's called After Image, and I literally got this idea from watching a game of Street Fighter 4. Because like when you go to do your EX moves or whatever, you get this shadow effect behind you, and it looks really cool on screen. And I was like, man, what if the shadows hurt you too? So when you cast After Image on something, probably not you, because you're probably not going to be a fighter, but it's more of like a support type spell. So you cast After Image on your fighter makes a hit. If that attack hits, well, then there's also this After Image coming that's going to do the same amount of damage as the first hit, unless they make a save against illusion or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So what she would do is she would cast After Image on her badger companion and then just send him in like a little furry cannonball. And he's going in doing double badger damage.
Double badger damage.
I had another player who was he made a necromancer, and necromancer, there's a spell called Festering Wounds, and it does, like, its damage is of higher scale than it should be for its mana cost, but it doesn't affect anyone who's at full hit points because
there's no wound to infect.
Right. So, like, if you get these two in the same party, she's sending Pip like charging in like Akuma or something, and then he's following it up with Festering Wounds, and that's a really big, powerful combination of magical damage they just did. But neither one of them could learn both of those spells because one's an illusionist and one's a necromancer.
It seems like the magic system, just the forethought for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's you're putting glyphs on stuff and you're doing demon calling beforehand.
Okay. So speaking of glyphs, one of the things that like I wanted to bring in was like wizards, and this is my own aesthetical choice because I grew up with like classic and second edition D&D. Wizards are supposed to be kind of vulnerable. Like
Yes.
That's one of the balancing features, right?
Class
okay.
Game.
So every wizard, depending on what school they're in, and you can learn multiple schools. It's the same way you could be a fighter who learns how to use like every weapon. You can be a wizard who learns to take multiple schools. The downside is you just have less magic from any one school.
Mm-hmm.
But you have access to glyph. It'd be like glyph of illusion or like glyph of evocation and stuff like that. The way that works, you cast that spell, a glowing glyph appears on the ground around you, and now your spells from that school cost 4 less mana to cast.
So you're kind of putting yourself in your own
For
turret.
as long as you stand on that glyph, your spells are cheaper. So now you have a choice of, do I want to spend a turn to cast this spell to get cheaper spells and limit my mobility, or do I need to be able to move around and stuff? I wanted everything to be a choice in this game. Do I do this or do I do that?
That's exceptionally dynamic.
Yeah.
Even with the broadsword styles or whatever. Like I think the first one you get is Precision Strike. I'm just going off the top of my head or whatever. If you're using a broadsword, you can choose. Normally, you make an attack as a standard action. You swung your sword. That's your attack. Or if you have Precision Strike, you can take an extended action, which means you don't get to move, and you can either make your attack with a +2 to your attack, or you can get +2 damage on a hit. So now you have to decide moment for moment: do I need to move, or can I lock in and do this thing here?
Yeah, is it harder to hit this guy, so do I need to make it easier to hit him? Or if I'm more likely to hit, do I need to be putting this guy down quick?
Wow. And so, like with evocation, there's basically 3 different elements in the evocation school. There's fire, lightning, and ice. I ruled that fire is the easiest element to manipulate with magic. So the fire spells tend to be a little bit cheaper, but they don't do as much damage. But at higher levels, the fire spells can inflict burning. We all know what burning is. Like you set them on fire and they take continuous damage after that.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas with lightning, lightning has a much higher range, doesn't do very much damage, but it can cause a stun effect after you get hit with it. Versus ice, which has the shortest range out of all of them, but does the most damage. And fire and electric attacks, you both resist those by making an agility check. Whereas with cold effects, you resist that by making a stamina check. Once again, I tried to make it where you have choices. Do you want to lean into fire or lightning or ice? Because each one of those is going to play differently. And because each one of them has prerequisites, like it works like a skill tree. Like you have to know basic fire before you can learn intermediate fire, before you can learn advanced fire.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And so like I wanted your characters to feel very thematic. Like I wanted you to be able to say like, oh, well, I'm a fire wizard versus like I'm an ice wizard. Both wizards, both from the same school of magic, both play completely differently at the table.
Yeah, that definitely provides a lot of distinction between your characters.
That almost feels like a Diablo skill tree.
I've not played Diablo since the first one, and that was before they introduced skills. So I'm going to have to take your word on that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm totally cool with that comparison. Diablo was great.
I'm not super familiar with Diablo either. Apparently, we got to play that game now, James.
Diablo 2?
I had a friend who was afraid of the thing on the cover, like because it was just this close-up picture of Diablo's face, and like by 1996 standards, that was terrifying.
Oh, that's very fair, honestly.
Yeah,
I'm pretty sure I saw Diablo in like a video game rental store or something when I was younger, and I was like, oh, that looks like it's gonna be a great game, not having any idea what it is. Just saw the image.
Dude, the opening cinematic of that game is like. You should YouTube it whenever you're done here because it's great.
Ooh, I'll definitely have to look into it. That's for sure.
One more thing about this game. I love how in-depth you went with the off time. Because that was some of the most fun stuff in D&D.
Yeah. Then that's... Because, like, okay, if you have a character who goes to the bar and plays darts versus has a character who, like, goes to the temple and prays... Like, those are both completely valid, and I wanted those to be represented in different ways at the table. Like, and this goes back to one of the things I mentioned, how I wanted money to always be valuable.
Right.
There's a lot of off-time activities that relate to money and stuff like that. Do you go buy the nice clothes? Do you go engage in a street fight behind the stockyard? Like, whatever it is. Once again, I wanted there to be interesting choices. I didn't want it to be like, well, we're in town again. They're like, well, okay, which town are we in again? It's like, fuck it don't matter.
They're all the same.
They're all the same anyway. And that's the reason why if you look at the town building section or whatever, if you follow the random town creation rules or whatever, every town's going to end up with different shops. This town sells like horses and axes. Like, well, this town has a really nice tavern. And there's an herbalist. So if you're sitting at a crossroads and you have to choose which direction you want to go based on which town is at the end of the road, now you have a choice to make.
Yeah, do I want to go to the town that has a really nice tavern? And if I remember correctly, you said that there's some buffs and stuff you can get from actually staying in some of the nicer taverns, right?
So like there's different versions of rest you can get in this game. There's like complete rest, and that's just standard. You get a full night's sleep, you heal a bunch, and you get all your mana back, if I remember correctly. Versus incomplete rest, which means you get some of your hit points back, a little bit of your mana, and that's about it. And where you're sleeping depends on what kind of rest you get. Also, this gave me a chance to, like, if you've got the survival skill, you can get complete rest sleeping outside. But if you don't have that skill, you need to find a bed and shelter or something because, like, your body's not made for this and you don't know what you're doing out there.
Yeah, if you don't have a bedroll under your sleeping bag, shit.
Yeah, that's uncomfortable. Like, we build houses for a reason.
Yeah, I'm, like, looking at the lodging. So I want to point this out, too, real quick. I know we're talking about lodging, but the first thing I read was meal, poor quality. And there's a 1 in 6 chance that a character eating it can become ill.
Yeah.
You can get food poisoning, man.
I mean,
Yes, you
poor
can.
quality meal. Like, good lord, that would suck. Just imagine you're given molded cheese
Yeah.
and like stale bread.
There's an optional rule for drinking tea and coffee.
A 1 in 12 chance of regaining 1 point of spent determination
Yeah.
for coffee. Yeah, this is awesome. Like, there's so many different things that your character, like, I guess you can call them buffs or debuffs or anything of that nature that can occur. Like, your characters decide to go to the tavern, and then when they consume beer or ale, they must make a stamina check or lose 1 point of determination. Like,
And like, I didn't want to go the route because like one of the criticisms against second edition was because like there was a lot of really fidgety kind of like, well, if you walk through a muddy stream, there's like a 3% chance you'll get leeches or something like that. Like, because no one remembers all that. No one, I don't know if anyone ever made a leech check, but what I wanted to do was like present the game masters with options. In my experience, as soon as the players figure out there's like a 1 in 12 chance they'll get something for drinking tea, that will become like a central part of their character. Like, I want to make sure we go someplace that has a tea house.
I want to have my morning tea every day before we go out on an
Yeah.
adventure.
And the rest of the characters probably aren't going to care.
Mm-hmm. But there's going
like
to be that
hardcore
one.
questing for an emulsifier to
Yeah.
stir up their matcha.
Yeah. I wanted there to be enough possibilities in here to engage with different people on different levels. Have you guys got to Hill Crown? Do you know about that?
No.
Proceed.
Okay. This was in first edition, and like a version of it made its way into second edition. And on the treasure table, there are little figurines that you can find, like, because it was just a random treasure. It's like, okay, you find a brass figurine shaped like a dragon. It's worth like 3 copper or something, like whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point, this idea came up. What if those figurines were actually part of a board game? And as you find different figurines throughout the game, you can use the different ones in the board game, and they do different stuff.
Oh.
So kind of like collecting magic cards or something like that.
Yeah.
And that also kind of explained like why they kept finding them on random treasure tables and stuff like that. Like, and so I eventually made up the rules for this game, for this board game. And I had at least one whole campaign that started to very heavily feature this particular board game. Like there was a quest where they had to go to this shop to like convince this dude to sell his rare piece that he had because he didn't like the dude who was wanting to buy it, so he didn't want to sell it to him. But he didn't want to sell it to the players because he didn't trust that they wouldn't give it to the other dude. But he came up with it's like, well, there's this other person over here who like broke into my shop, and if you can go get my pieces back, I'll. And then we had one, quote unquote boss fight that was literally just playing Hill Crown. It went full Yu-Gi-Oh! Like they're sitting there at their game board with their pieces and stuff like that, and the different pieces did different stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Players are fun. Like they come to these games because they want to have fun. They want to engage. Some of them are looking to engage with the minute-by-minute combat and like kicking in doors and stuff like that. And others are really there because they want their character to find the best tea shop in all of the land.
General Iroh.
I was going to say, yeah, they're Iroh.
And I wanted that to be meaningful. I didn't want it to just be an afterthought or something like that.
Yeah.
Huh.
I definitely think you have done an incredible job with this.
I tried very hard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really liking what I'm seeing. I cannot wait till I get my hardcover copy in. I'm definitely putting that right next to all the rest of my books. I'm gonna keep it there. Actually, I might put it up on my shelf up here above my computer.
We might mail it to you for signature if that's all right.
Oh, absolutely. One of the things that was like, and I included this with downtime and stuff like that. There's like very little of this stuff like shows up like in adventuring because like role players have been adventuring for like 30 years now. Like we know how to adventure.
Yeah.
But when it gets like into the town stuff, I think it's kind of assumed like that's your time. Like, how do you want to spend it? Like, and when you learn that, you can play cards or you can, get involved in street fights or whatever. And like,
be Tim Kennedy.
It's there if you want it, and if you want to, fine, just skip it and buy your healing herbs and like head on out.
Right.
So that was the goal. Based on the games I've seen and heard about, I did pretty good with it. So I hope I did a good job.
I think you did. And I'm by no means an expert in tabletop RPGs, but all I can tell you is that I've been playing for about 15 years.
Mhm.
I'm a huge fan, and I loved looking through your particular game, and I'm really excited to get my copy in. So I have one last question for you, James, before I'm done
Okay.
bothering you this evening. And my question is, if I wanted to break your system, your game, how can I break it?
Let me think. Because like somebody already tried making a wizard without any mana, and so there was a little bit of a weird combination that happened once where someone was using two-weapon fighting, but he was using sickle swords instead of a more traditional type of sword.
So like Tiger Hook sword type dealy.
Yeah. And because of the interactions of those two things, it was way more powerful than I think anyone was really expecting. But then the dude got knocked out by like a lightning bolt, like on like the second game. So I don't think it was like broken, because like even if you're the best fighter out there, you can still like, get taken out by a crossbow.
Or a lightning bolt.
Yeah, the best wizard like still has to like stand there and like count their mana points as they're like, casting their spells and stuff like that. One thing I do want to point out that I did with magic was like, I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but I think the longest range that any spell in this game has is 10 yards. There are things you can do to change that. I think there's like an amulet or something you can wear that doubles your spell's range or something. And the longest duration without modification is 5 rounds. And the reason I stuck with that was because I wanted your spells to all be like meaningful in combat on the grid when you're at the table and stuff like that. But when you get right down to it, if you're throwing lightning bolts at a 10-yard range, it's still pretty possible that someone can run up and like shank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. 10 yards is not a lot.
Yeah. Nope.
Right. So like the spells are cool and they give you cool options outside of what, a fighter could normally do. But it's not to the point where like they are half a mile away and about to burst into flames. I wanted to keep all of the ranges and stuff at a point where, even though, yeah, it's advantageous to be able to hit people from across the mat, you're never like invincible by virtue of your magic. And the 5 round limit on duration and stuff, well, you cast your spell, you want your spell to do a thing, and then it does that thing. Then we move on with the game. It's not like you wake up in the morning, have like your 3 spells that you cast on yourself before you get out of bed, and then you're walking around enchanted for the rest of the day.
You got your mage armor just floating around you all day.
Or just wading through the battlefield with spirit guardians for 10 turns.
Yeah.
Just smoking everything.
Like you have your little like floating like spirit guardian just like perched on your shoulder for no reason.
Yeah,
like
it's just sitting there while you're drinking your tea.
Not only do I want to highlight how you made every decision matter, from what town you're going to, what build you're going with, what weapon. The thing that impresses me the most is that you stuck with small numbers. I can't stand doing insane amounts of math at the table. That's one reason I wasn't huge at, 3.5? That's like +2 for this, +5 for this, +3.
Okay, have you noticed the core mechanic of the game? Instead of rolling 1d20, you roll 2d10s, but you count the 10s, and instead of going from 1 to 10, they go 0 to 9.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
That does 2 things. One, it does skew the numbers low, just a little bit, but enough that I didn't feel like I needed to include like any kind of untrained penalty or anything like that, because the numbers are naturally low. Also, the numbers are, it's slight, but it is noticeable. There's a bell curve. And that way, a +1 bonus is worth more. And each successive bonus is worth more than the last one because it's getting you further away from the middle of that bell curve.
Yeah.
And I felt very comfortable working with small numbers since I already had that cushion from the dice themselves. And in order to get a critical in this game, you need to roll doubles on a successful roll. which means as you get better at doing something, the possible range of successful rolls increases, which means the possible number of criticals increases. So as you get better at doing something, you're naturally more likely to score a critical success on something without having to go into like tables and math and stuff like that. Like you're at this point, your critical range increases or anything. It does that naturally. It does it just through the dice.
Makes sense.
What else would you like to highlight?
So one thing that hasn't been brought up, I'm very proud of the character creation system in this game. I think it's one of my favorite parts, and it's one of the coolest ways that I like to introduce new players to this game, is being like, no, look, character creation is actually very simple. And a lot of the favors and stuff have prerequisites that you have to meet before you can take them, right? So therefore, a starting character only even qualifies for a small number of the favors, so there's not a gigantic list. Like you can get into the archetypes, like you can get into a school of magic, you can get into a type of weapon, but you don't have to pick between like a plethora of like minutia between. It's like, well, do I want to do this with my sword or do I want to do this with my sword? It's like, no, take sword one and we'll deal with the rest later on. Okay, at each step of character creation, you have what's called a customization option. And each character gets to take one customization option. And so, like, when you're assigning your attributes at the very, very beginning, every character starts with 4, right?
Right.
But if you use your customization option here, you can start with 5, but you get one of your attributes is -1. Then you can't use your customization option again after that. That's you used it for character creation on that. Or when you're picking your skills, every character starts with 3 skills. Or you can use a customization option to let you start with 5 skills, assuming you didn't use it on your attributes.
I'm probably picking up that wealthy stuff.
Yeah. When you get to your favors, everybody starts with 2 favors unless you use your customization option to start with 3. And then at the very end, you can use your customization option to just get a ton of money. If nothing else enticed you, just take the money. Because of that, even at first level, starting out, 2 brand new characters can still look weirdly different. Like this dude has got 5 attribute points and this guy's got 3 favors. Like those are 2 different characters, like on a fundamental level. They play different, they look different, they feel different. I was very happy with that system.
That is an incredible system. I love that you've simplified it,
Mm-hmm.
but kept it diverse enough that you can be whoever and whatever you want to be.
Yeah. Also, because when I introduced the -1 thing, I realized that the possibility for like dump stats became a thing. And the first one that hit me was the mind score, because if you're not playing a wizard, what do you need with mind? Like blah, blah, blah. Like, of course. And I didn't like that because I don't think adventurers should necessarily be like, subpar intellectually unless they want to be. So what I did was with the mind score, yes, it affects magic. It is tied to the lore skill. You can do some you use mind to resist illusions and stuff like that. So it's not like mind is useless outside of magic. But also, after you make your character, whenever you finish character creation, you get experience points based on your mind score. So if you have a mind score of 3, you start the game with 3 experience points. And that also really kind of helps wizards because they can use those extra experience to like get, more buy-in on their spells, because it tends to be a very XP heavy build to make a magic user, and having those extra XP from their mind score helps them out. Also, as a natural consequence of that, if you dump stat your mind score and make mind -1, that means you start the game at -1 XP. And that is not a huge penalty. But I have never once met a player who was willing to take a -1, like start the game in debt with their experience points.
The first XP I make just brings me up to normal.
Brings you to 0. Yeah, like
That's really smart. It's a really great way to make sure people don't just simply like, I don't need mind.
yeah. It's like I said, it's not that bad of a penalty, but it feels awful.
Yeah.
Like you finish your first game and everyone's like, woohoo, we've got like 3 experience points. I want to increase this skill. It's like, no, I'm going to save mine to like increase this attribute. And you're sitting over there like,
I got a rock.
right.
Heck yeah, man. Well, I mean, your system sounds very sound. I mean, incredible job on it, man. Like, I'm super
Thank
stoked
you.
about it. We're going to have the link down to where our listeners can go and find this system. They
Perfect.
can get Raven of the Scythe. You can buy the PDF. You can buy the PDF and the hardcover copy version if you want. It's a phenomenal book. I love looking at it. I can't wait till I have my book in. Aaron, did you have any last couple of questions? Anything that's just haunting you that you have for James?
I'm not haunted. I am inspired. The one thing that we haven't mentioned that really stuck out in the brainstorm is the hit points kind of range
Yeah.
that I wanted to touch on before we run the closer.
Okay.
What's like a normal hit points range throughout this game?
20. So the most complicated equation at character creation is how you determine your hit points. Your hit points are, you start out with 16. Every normal human has 16 hit points plus 4 for every point they have in stamina. So assuming you are a slightly above average person stamina wise, like maybe you do cardio or something, so you've got a 1 in stamina, that 1 point in stamina gives you an extra 4 hit points, which brings you to 20 hit points. So definitely, your fightery types or whatever, they're probably going to have the 20 hit points. If you decide not to put a point in stamina, you start out with 16. Or if you dump your stamina, you start out with 12. And I chose 20 to be the assumed hit points of a melee type build because that character can be taken out with 3 hits from a longsword within on average. Because your first hit, you're like, oh man, I can take that, like whatever, and keep fighting. You take the second hit, you're like, ooh, maybe I should back off a little bit.
Yeah.
And like you survive your third hit and you're like, I need help. Like I'm looking for the exit at this point.
Doc.
And yeah. And I wanted it to be kind of that range. Like I wanted fights to have that level of pressure on them. It's rare, it's exceedingly rare, but not impossible for an attack to do 20 hit points in a single hit.
Mm-hmm.
It's also, somebody can come at you with a knife and just like shink, 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 shink.
Yeah.
So like, we're going to be here for a while, but I wanted it to like kind of have that amount of pressure where you can take a few good hits and probably be okay, but then you're looking for help. I didn't want your characters to ever feel like, oh, what? They've only got axes? We'll be fine. Like, whatever. We've got like, like our wizard has 68 hit points. Like, it's going to take them way longer to kill us than it will to kill them. Like,
yeah, he'll be fine. There's no worries.
Yeah. Also, since your hit point total is kind of low, you have a limited pool called determination, which comes from your willpower stat. You can spend determination to heal yourself 4 hit points. So that way every character has a little bit of self-healing that they can do, but you can also spend your determination to do other things like give yourself +2 on a skill check or something like that. So once again, you have to make a choice. Do I want to recover 4 hit points, or do I want to give myself +2 on my next attack and hopefully end this?
Now, I know a lot of people typically in RPG settings always say that the best offense is a good defense. Do you think that is a good saying for your system?
Yes and no, because, okay, in one of my games that I played, there was a girl, it was her first time playing, and she really wasn't sure what to do. So we just told her to just take the money at character creation, and she used that money to buy a suit of plate armor. And we got into the first fight, and one of the enemies runs up. It makes an attack at her. She's sitting there cringing while I'm rolling the dice. She's like, what's going to happen? Am I going to die? And the attack hit her. We rolled for damage, and the enemy wasn't able to get through her armor. Like, she took no damage from it. And she sat there and she thought about it for a second. She was like, you mean I just didn't get hurt at all? And we're like, no, because you're wearing that like super cool armor. And she's like, oh, okay. And just proceeds to like wade in to every fight after that because she was completely and utterly immune to most forms of melee attacks. However, armor does absolutely nothing to protect you against magical attacks like fire or lightning or ice or anything. So as soon as we encountered things that had the ability to do different types of damage, all of a sudden she's very, very vulnerable and approaching this much differently. Also, certain weapons, as I say, if you have a longsword and a mace, they do roughly the same amount of damage. I am going just from memory here. A longsword does 1d8. I think a mace does 1d8, right? On a critical, a longsword does 2d8 and a mace does 1d10. And that's the difference. About the same damage. Longsword has better critical damage than a mace. However, a mace ignores half of the resistance from armor or something like that because it's a bashing weapon. So if she sees dudes with like knives and swords and stuff, she's fine. If they start pulling out like maces and flails and stuff, she's like, oh, wait a second.
I don't jive with that type of
Yeah,
combat.
yeah. So like, she was the most armored up person you could get in the game, and she was still vulnerable to 2/3 of the damage types. So even at her most tanky, there were still considerations to make.
That sounds incredibly balanced.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was really, really trying hard on this one.
Yeah.
Because like I didn't want there to be a scenario where, someone could just like become immune to everything. Like there's no win button in Raven of the Scythe. Like everyone, at the end of the day, everyone is still a human and humans can get hurt and humans can die. And I really wanted to beat that point home. Like, yes, you are a hero, you are an adventurer, go out and do great things. Also, watch out for the trees, man, because there might be dudes with crossbows up there. Like,
Yeah.
there's a skill tree where you can increase your armor, like how much your armor bonuses are. So that's kind of cool. So yeah, swords aren't good against armor, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, there is a skill you can learn with the broadsword skill tree or whatever that lets you do things like pommel strikes and half swording and stuff like that, where you reduce the damage of your longsword, but you give it the bashing trait so you can ignore armor. And I was explaining to someone what that was. They're like, how would you do that? And I was like, well, that's where you grab the blade of your sword and you swing it and hit them with the hilt part. And they're like, no, you couldn't do that in real life. And he's like, what's half sword? And I was like, well, that's where you grab the blade of your sword so you can use the end like a knife and like stick it through like the joints in the armor. And I showed them this YouTube video of a guy doing just that. Like he's got a tire hanging from a chain. He's just like wailing on it with this sword that he just demonstrated was actually sharp. And he's like, yeah, I can feel the blade, but like it's not cutting me. So if you hold it right, like you'll be fine. And like, he's like putting dents in metal plates and stuff with it. And it's like, oh, okay. Like also, I'm very proud of the craft and alchemy system I made for the game.
Right.
Because I wanted money to be important and I wanted there to be a ton of different ways to engage with this. And part of that meant, for one, you can craft your own items like alchemical stuff, like bombs and potions, and you can like sigil your weapons to do different abilities and stuff like that. Also, you can create superior versions of weapons and armor and stuff that have different bonuses because this is a relatively low magic game. So in order to kind of bridge that gap between a starting level adventurer versus, someone who's been at it for a while and they're decked out with magic gear, you can make just better versions of armor. Like, because like I wanted there to be that possibility of like, oh, we need to trek up to this mountain to like find the emperor's old like armor smith who like lives in the temple still, like. And also, since that's a system in the game, there's nothing stopping your characters from learning how to do this stuff themselves. Maybe they do it to equip themselves with better stuff. Maybe they make it a side hustle where they make money between adventures. that allowed me to include things like, crafting iron and stuff like that on the treasure tables because okay, you found like 3 pieces of iron in a dungeon somewhere. You can take those and sell them, or maybe you want to hold on to those because you have an idea for a really sick axe you want to make. Like I wanted there to be as many choices in this game as possible. Like because in my experience, choices are the points where people get engaged.
I completely agree.
They get a hand in crafting the world and the reality.
Yeah.
Right. And also like think about how cool that is. I'm using this sword that has the bonus that I wanted because I made it with the materials that I found. That's a link to your character that I think is really special.
Yeah. There's not very many things that can like build that bond.
Mm-hmm.
And, thinking about it too, like if your character were to come across, I don't know, 12,000 gold pieces or something through the game during his adventure and they just go and buy whatever they want to buy versus like they get to craft it in between like a couple adventures every now and then. Like that's incredible, man.
Like they worked for that. That's time and effort spent on this thing.
Yep. That's so awesome. I love the system. I love the game. You did a phenomenal job with it, James.
I really appreciate that. Like there was so much work and effort and playtesting and sitting at my computer until like the wee hours of the morning, like being like, no, I have to finish this one part and then I can rest.
Aaron feels that whenever he's got to edit the podcast.
We're coming up on 6 hours of footage.
Yep.
Oh, good. So, yeah, you can knock that out in like a couple of hours.
Yeah, he's got it.
Just put on some Star Trek reruns and like have yourself a night.
Aaron does love Star Trek, right, Aaron?
Papaw did.
Well, James.
Any closing remarks?
I really hope you like my game. Like there have been times when like I've really, really been tempted to quit, like because this is hard. It is time consuming. But then like every once in a while, like I'll just get a random message from someone or like someone will leave a comment on like my abandoned YouTube videos or something. And I'm like, wow, people really do like this. I think I'm good for the next 18 months now. Okay, so plans for the future with Raven of the Scythe. I'm in school right now. I'm going back on my GI Bill and stuff like that. So right now I'm currently double majoring in English and anthropology. So school's taking a lot of my time and effort and energy right now. But what my plan is, I haven't put out anything for a long time, even though I really want to. It's just I don't have the energy for it right now. They're almost ready. I've made some adventure modules. Like there's like a starting adventure series that is almost good to go. I think it's got like 4 or 5 different like kind of smaller adventures in it, kind of like to just get you into the world of Raven of the Scythe. And then after that one, I wanted to periodically release new adventure modules. I've already started working on some of them. Like all of these are in various stages of completion. And in the new adventure modules, in every one, I want to include like maybe 1 or 2 new monsters because there was a lot of monsters that got cut from first edition to second edition. So I wanted to use these adventure modules as a way to like kind of update some of the older monsters and reintroduce them into the world. And I don't know, maybe then like after I have like a few of those out, I'll do like a monster compendium or something where like if all you want is just the monsters and you don't want to have to sort through a bunch of like adventure modules you're not interested in, like you can get them that way. Apparently, like I didn't take the lessons of Dungeons and Dragons where like they just constantly pump out like player content because players are the ones who like tend to buy things or whatever.
Makes sense, yeah.
As a game master, I buy plenty and like I'm always looking for new stuff to like give me tools to throw at the players and stuff. So I tend to try to give the DM things. Like I said before, like I've never been in a situation where I'm like, man, this game just has too many monsters. Like hopefully this summer I can get the ball rolling with that a little bit, like after the semester ends and stuff like that. Like I said, this whole game, it's just me, usually sitting alone in a dark room.
That's how it usually goes for our projects.
Yeah. That's what I have going forward. I hope I can like, get that going later this year.
We will be sharing that whenever we have news.
Definitely.
Okay, cool. I appreciate that.
And I will be purchasing your supplemental material as well when you release it. So I'm very
As a forever
Neato.
GM.
as a forever GM.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're making content for me specifically. I'm happy about it.
Oh, good. Like, well, I hope you enjoy it then.
Thank you so much, James.
No problem.
Well, James, thank you for shining your light.
And a huge thank you to all of you for listening.
This has been Aaron.
And Tim with James.
A huge thank you to Highland Markle for the original music.
Share this episode with someone who could benefit from it.
Let us know what you want to hear our take on.
Or email us to collab.
All pertinent links can be found in the episode description.
Be good to yourselves and each other.
We love you.
Peace.
Disclaimer.
Our podcast is for entertainment purposes and cannot be substituted for professional advice.
If you need help urgently, please call 911 or 988. If not, seek some professional medical assistance.
Maybe even at betterhelp.com/NSLP. Peace.